afternoon and welcome back. My name is Diana Lopez and I'm co-chair of the Lead It Host Committee and a member of the class of 1978. I also serve on the executive committee of the Alumni Council and also on the Board of Trustees. We're thrilled to have some of our university leaders here, including some of my fellow trustees, joining us today to talk about the exciting initiatives at the university and share how Tufts' comprehensive campaign, Brighter World, is supporting and advancing the university's core teaching and research mission. There will also be an opportunity for you to ask questions of the panel later in our session. Our moderator, my fellow trustee, Neal Shapiro, class of 1980, and one of the co-chairs of the Brighter World campaign, who serves alongside Saul Gittleman, John Tisch, and Meredith Vieira in this important role. In addition to being a dedicated Tufts volunteer, Neal is president and CEO of WNET in New York City, the largest public media station in the United States. He has won 32 Emmys, 31 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and 3 DuPont Columbia Awards. I can tell you from having listened to Neal moderate other events in the past, you're in for a real treat. Neal, take it away.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here, and we're going to have an exciting conversation with our great panel. It's great to see so many distinguished alums here. So we're going to talk about the Brighter World campaign, the impact it's already had, about students and faculty. We'll talk about some other questions, too. We'll save some time for you, but I'm going to begin with some breaking news. So as you know, the Brighter World, our goal is an ambitious $1.5 billion, and as of today, we are on the threshold of being the halfway point. We've raised $722 million. Give yourself a big hand. So over the remaining years of the campaign, our hope is to engage many more alums and friends to help do that, and I hope that each of you can leave this Lead It conference informed and inspired about helping us to do more of that. So thank you for all you've done so far. And now, as I say, let's meet our panel. So if everybody join me up here. As you know, Tony Monaco has completed his 7th year as president of Tufts. He came to us from Oxford. He was highly regarded as an academic leader, as a distinguished geneticist with breakthrough research accomplishments related to muscular dystrophies and neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism and dyslexia. This past year, Tony was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, along with 2 other people, I guess, who did okay, Barack Obama and Tom Hanks. But, and I'm sure they're saying, hey, we made it with Tony Monaco. Next, Debbie Kochevar. She serves as provost ad interim following a remarkable tenure as dean of the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine. She came here in 2006. Over the dozen years of leadership at the Cummings School, she oversaw significant renovations of the hospital, as well as curricular innovations that included research collaborations across multiple schools under the banner of One Health. She's been recognized as a leader in the academy for her efforts in support of diversity and inclusion. In her current role, she oversees the academic enterprise of 8 schools, as well as multiple cross-school programs, centers, and initiatives. And finally, Peter Dolan has served on the Board of Trustees since 2001, recently completed his 5th year as chairman of the board. He's had a very distinguished career as an entrepreneur and CEO in the pharmaceutical industry, and he's served on numerous boards, both profit and nonprofit. So Tony, let me begin with you. We're going to talk a lot about the Brighter World campaign, all the great things it's done, but why don't we begin with the notion of the impact it's already made and what we hope to accomplish. Now, the first pillar of the campaign is really securing the resources that students need. Can you talk to us first about the class of 2022? How are they benefiting already, and how do you hope it to go in the future?
Well, there's 2 areas of the campaign that I think have impacted our current students, and particularly the new class, and that is the financial aid initiative, which was a challenge to match any donation over $100,000 for endowment for scholarships. We raised almost $100 million on that endeavor, and now through the campaign, through endowment and annual fund, have raised $188 million across the university for financial aid. So that's something to be very proud of, and we have a lot more to do in this campaign, but it's allowed us to have the most diverse class in the class of 2022 that we've ever had. 37% students of color. Pell Grants are robust, the largest number of students, international students on financial aid. That's something else that we weren't able to support so much in the past, but a lot of international alumni have given to financial aid to support that. But it's not only about the composition, it's what the experience is like when they're here. Another initiative which we just launched was the Professor Partnership Challenge, where we're trying to match gifts for endowment to support existing professors. That is going to impact the education of these students. We're able to bring in, through generous donation of John and Lizzie Tisch to the Tisch College, a number of new professorships around civic engagement, but also with a foot in some of our academic disciplines, particularly in arts and sciences. So new professors, support for professors who bring the excitement of what they're doing into the classroom. Another example, hot off the press from the trustee meeting, is we were able to approve a new department which grew out of the Race, Colonialism, and Diaspora program. So that is now going to become an official Department of Arts and Sciences, and we will be, yeah, thank you. And we will, through generous support of the campaign, hopefully hire a number of new lines to support that program going forward. So I think those are the two areas, besides the general changes we've made in residential and social life on campus for students with investments in the dorms. You can see Miller and Houston. I can no longer use that joke that they're exactly as you remember them, because they are getting a major renovation. We've also started our own version of off-campus housing, but on campus in wood frames, and we're doing that in Medford and hopefully in Somerville to add a lot of new beds in the situation that students like in wood-framed independent living, but on campus. I think that'll benefit students as well, and the campaign has helped support some of those capital investments.
Thanks, Tony. Deb, I want to talk a little bit about research. Now, sometimes as trustees, we get to do cool things. One of the cool things we got to do was to go out and see the school in Grafton and see all the cool research that there was. So you have both kind of primary experience in seeing the kind of research and breakthroughs that can happen, and now as provost, you're seeing across the potential all across the schools. How do you think about the stuff you've already seen and where we could go in terms of research?
Thank you. And I would just start by saying thank you to all of you. As a former dean, volunteers and people who support us in our endeavors, whether that's because you're motivated by the students, the faculty, in our case, the animals, it's really a huge piece. Tufts couldn't do what they do without you, so thank you. So as Neal said, I've had the lens of a dean for many years and have appreciated the research programs that have grown at the veterinary school, but now sitting in the provost ad interim job, it's just fascinating to see all of the things that the faculty are up to. The trustees are meeting. They met yesterday and today, and one of the programs that was approved was a master's program in offshore wind. First such program in the U.S. Programs like that happen because Tufts hires really interesting, talented faculty. And so the continuation of that story is now that faculty who are establishing this program, we're also competing for a National Science Foundation planning grant. So 300 applications, 30 schools were selected. Tufts was one of those. And now they will work over the coming months to develop a very large application for a National Science Foundation Center. The university will invest in those efforts to support them. And wouldn't it be great if Tufts had a center of excellence in this area? So that kind of shows this continuum of, you hire the right faculty, they do innovative things, they become nationally competitive, Tufts' reputation goes up, and it really all starts with our investment in those faculty. Another sector of the faculty that are sort of near and dear to both my experience at Tufts, but I think really across all of our schools, is internationalism. And so as the trustees were meeting, they had a brochure that was called Tufts University Engagement in Global Health. And if the first 2 or 3 pages of that have pictures of faculty and some of the things that they're doing internationally. I think we pride ourselves on having global impact and doing things that carry what we do at Tufts into the world. And so, so the research that goes into that is very important because our infectious disease faculty, our policy faculty who know how to translate what we need to do in the field into policy so that it can be sustained. Tufts has a particularly attractive and powerful way of contributing those talents. And so we have a United States Agency for International Development, USAID grant, that spans several of our schools and is really asking the question, how do we work to stem emergence of pandemic threats like Ebola and avian influenza and diseases that you hear about in the news and seem like they're a far distance from us, but in fact Tufts is there. And finally, I think part of the question was, so these are the things we're doing now. many, many more things. So how is that going to play out in the future, and how do we sustain that? So I'm pleased to say that we just completed a research and scholarship strategic plan. Dr. Samin Maidani is the director of our Office of the Vice Provost for Research, and she spent about 18 months speaking to the faculty, learning about research at Tufts, what we do well, what we don't do so well, and really crafting 5 major areas of emphasis. And around those areas, groups were formed, they submitted proposals. Those proposals, some percentage, were funded by Tufts to seed these high impact areas. And so one of those areas, for example, was the Center for Studying Antimicrobial Resistance. So again, you've probably heard in the newspaper that we now have superbugs that we can't treat with the antibiotics that we have. And so this collection of people from the med school and the vet school and the public health area will go about thinking about that and doing studies, and the data they collect will allow them, again, to apply for extramural funds from NIH, from global health agencies. And with that, we will carry really the strength of Tufts, the strength of our faculty and our research into the world and really have an impact. So it's very exciting.
So Peter, the third pillar of Brighter World is all about civic engagement. It's one of the things that I think we like to think of ourselves as sort of unique about students who really want to make a difference in the world. From your perspective, both as a chairman of the board and your other links in the business world, how do you see that playing out?
Well, I'm going to come back and answer that question in 1 minute, but I want to ask the audience something first. Who saw Jeopardy last night? Did you notice any unique questions? So the Jeopardy answer was, Tufts University mascot name is P.T. Barnum was an early benefactor and trustee. And the question was? Thank you for expressing it in question form. That was important, actually. I thought I was going to catch it by saying Jumbo, but you got ahead of me. Yeah, a little fun fact last night, and timely for our meeting this weekend. Let me talk about, from my perspective, impact. And I would say 3 things, and I'll elaborate on them. The first is partnerships. The second is research, and the third would be acumen to create a dialogue. And what I mean by that is we are tremendously capable, but we multiply the impact of our efforts dramatically by creating partnerships with other players in the space who can help us work to solve really difficult problems. Partnerships with the business community, having the ability to do the research to answer fundamental questions, and the acumen and ability to create dialogue across sectors. And I can give you a personal firsthand example of what all that means to me. Somewhere around 7 or 8 years ago, actually with the Friedman School, created an organization called Child Obesity 180, which was intended to combat the epidemic of childhood obesity. We brought in partners from the business world, from the NGO world, from academia, and created a place where we could have a dialogue about how to solve one of the world's biggest problems. The research part of this, Friedman School is obviously a noted research nutrition expert in the world, and Christina Economos, who is a child obesity expert, partnered with me to create this organization, and we did some research to help get to what would be some big actions we could take to really make a difference. And having the acumen and ability to bring multiple players to the table where they could participate in a dialogue and come up with significant solutions to solve challenging problems, I think really illustrates this. Neal Shapiro, actually, I dragged him into this as well. He was a part of this group as well. But to give you one example of things that we did, one of the biggest problems is physical activity has been totally taken out of the schools because of budget cuts. So a very small percentage of schools in the United States have physical activity as a quality physical activity program as part of their school menu. Order of magnitude maybe 7%. So we created an organization and a concept around billion-mile race, which was to get kids to walk or run 100 miles over the course of a year. In a year, we had 1,000 schools in 50 states. In 3 years, we had participation from over 8,000 schools in all 50 states, and got it to a place where now, to transition to someone who could scale it up further, we transferred it to New York Roadrunners, who are now taking that program and building it beyond the 8,000 schools we were in. That's a good example of how I think Tufts can make a difference in the world, and it obviously just doesn't relate to childhood obesity. It relates to international, global hotspot problems that Fletcher would have unique perspectives on. It could apply to tuberculosis outbreaks. It could apply to a broad range of activities. I think the combination of partnerships and the ability to do research and to have the acumen to bring players together to get in a dialogue to solve problems is really the way forward.
Thank you, Peter. I think we, as ambassadors for a brighter world, we want to all the great things that Tufts does. So I think one of the things we need to do is be honest about when there are shortcomings and issues that may come up, both with ourselves and to help us be better ambassadors when we get asked about questions. And Tufts will continue to strive to do better when there are issues, but we want to talk about them. And one such one came up recently. It was an assessment about leadership diversity, about colleges, and sad to say, study in Massachusetts colleges, that Tufts ranked at the bottom, though along with some other colleges like Boston College, BU, and MIT, and the question is about women serving in important roles. So, Tony, how should we think about that?
Well, firstly, I think I should explain what the survey looked at and what it didn't look at, so you know what we're talking about. It was a survey of gender balance in the president, provost, chair of the board, percentage of the board which is female, and then all the EVP, executive vice president, and all the deans. And what it didn't take into account was any of the other senior leadership positions, like my senior team or any senior officers in the provost's office, like the vice provost for research, where in that latter category we have quite good gender balance. At the time, David Harris was provost, so we had 3 males in that role, and the majority of our deans at that time were male. So that is not the outcome that we want to see. I take personal responsibility for that, and I'm taking it very seriously. The good news is we have an opportunity with the provost search underway and 3 dean searches, all to be completed by the end of the academic year, to rebalance and look hard at the candidates we bring forward so that we could have a better balance within our deans in particular and the provost position.
Deb, anything you want to add?
So first of all, I'm doing my part. I would just say that we actually knew that this was an issue, and we have been thinking about it. And so there was a group that worked a few years back to ask the question, what can we do to increase the pipeline, to have more females and actually individuals of color, women of color, who will in fact get to the senior leadership ranks. And so the group that worked looked nationally, looked at the literature, thought about what practices at Tufts we could actually do better to begin to fill the pipeline. And so a lot of that has to do with mentoring of mid-career folks who have aspirations to want to continue. And so we're looking at how that works actually on multiple levels. I think that best practices in search committees is also a very important feature. We have for a while, in a sort of voluntary way, had implicit bias training for search committees and people who are going to be in hiring roles. We're in the process of trying to put in place a much more robust capacity to do that kind of training, which I think that helps because it just primes people to be very open to looking at a broad field of applicants and making good choices. So I really, to Tony's comment, we're not happy with that statistic, but it's not like we needed that statistic to say we need to work hard on this because we actually already are. It's not a fast process.
So let me stay with you and talk about something else that people are talking about, which is if there's anybody on the planet who doesn't know the midterms are coming up. And what, in my experience, I've never seen the country as polarized as it is now. And I wonder how that, especially where the whole political atmosphere is supercharged, where people have difficulty just talking to each other in a civil way, how does that play out on a place like Tufts, where the students are civically engaged, but they're also young and passionate, idealistic? How does that play out? How would you like it to play out? Yes, for you.
So just after the last elections, our former provost, David Harris, made a very important decision along with President Monaco to establish a group called Bridging Differences. And it is exactly what it says. Its intent is to try to encourage individuals, students, faculty, and staff to find ways to talk about difficult topics and to have those dialogues in productive ways, in ways that both parties leave the conversation feeling like they had a genuine, sincere sort of exchange. So Bridging Differences was active last year, but needed to be more active. And so this summer, the group had a major retreat. We expanded the membership to include more students, to include more sectors of the campus. We will shortly announce a grant program for students, faculty, and staff to be able to ask for small bits of funding to come with their own initiatives that help people gain this ability. It's really an ability to speak with others productively. That group is very energized. So that's one that I'm encouraged, and it's actually quite fun too. The second, we had heard from more than one sector that opportunities for people to sit and have meaningful conversations were limited, and that's partially limited because we're all very busy and we're always moving from one place to the next and have lots of priorities. So we've established a monthly new series called Tufts Table, and the intent is to bring together a group of people, faculty, staff, and students, and to seat them together for a meal, to have a facilitator at each one of our tables of 6, 7, 8 individuals. That's a student facilitator, so those student facilitators are being trained then to help people have meaningful dialogue. And then the table takes up a themed area for each dinner. After each dinner, we send to campus a very short synopsis of, what were some of the lessons learned? What are some tips if you are going to talk about difficult topics? So the first one, Bridging Differences, co-hosted it. The second one, Tisch College of Civic Life, co-hosted. And theirs was really about how do you have meaningful discussions around political things that can be polarizing. So my hope is that we will continue to do those. We'll find more and more ways to just, in some sense, train people to be good at that. You see my jumbo vote button? That's another initiative on campus, which again is Tisch College, and it's the same thing. It's just this effort to encourage people to reach out beyond what is their comfort zone, to talk to people who maybe they wouldn't talk to every day, and to do that in a way that works.
So we're going to talk about anniversaries. 2018, a lot of anniversaries in the Tufts world. 150 years ago in 1868, the founding of the dental school. 125 years ago, 1893, the founding of the medical school. 40 years ago, 1978, the founding of what would become the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy and the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine. And also the year that a certain Peter Dolan graduated from Tufts. That Peter
I'm sure
Dolan.
you're allowed to share my age, Jack.
I think you were 15, so it's, let me start with Tony. As we think about those schools, Tony, how do you think about, for any ones you'd like to pick, the challenges and opportunities facing those schools?
Well, I'd like to speak particularly about the health professions. I think one of the challenges is that the curriculum is, if any of you have ever been to one of those professional schools, the curriculum is just so overwhelming with information. And it's really stressful for students to try to learn that and then apply it in the clinical setting. And so I know the veterinary school and the dental school, and I believe the medical school not so long ago, did a complete curriculum reform, trying to bring how we get students to intake all this information and apply it in a way which is just better. There are better practices, and we were stuck in the lecture mode in some of these schools. So I think that's an area of a challenge and opportunity, but our schools are going through that process, and I think the Cummings is doing it also in the next year.
Yes, and it's a multi-year event. It's actually quite an upheaval to change curricula. But what's great, and I'm at risk for getting on my soapbox, but we have a phrase called One Health, which really suggests that there are no dividing lines between animal, human, and environmental health. And I think Tufts is so well positioned as they redesign curricula and as they think about their research to capitalize on these different perspectives. And I think that is also looking forward. There's such great exchange between the vet school and the med school nutrition, and certainly back to the Medford campus as well. And that's what keeps you dynamic, I think, in curricula and in research and in really all the things that we do.
The other thing I would mention is the Friedman School just finished their strategic plan, and a big opportunity there is the view of the Friedman School as a trusted voice in nutrition. I mean, anyone who picks up the newspaper can read wildly different stories about what's good for you and not good for you. They do the research, they do the analysis of these big studies, and also the HNRCA. We should be a trusted voice. We should be advising government as we are, but doing it more. We should be trying to work with the lay public to be that voice that they can rely on to get good nutrition information. And the other opportunity that I've seen grow in the Friedman School in this new strategy is entrepreneurship around nutrition. And I think all of our graduate and professional schools are thinking about how they can offer that kind of skills to their students. There's great interest in it. There's a market out there for these things, and it's something we don't traditionally teach.
Peter?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's worth noting as we celebrate the anniversaries of these schools is one of our unique points of difference is our diversity. There are really no other schools in the country that have the broad diversity of schools that we do. And while if you went to Tufts as an undergrad, you might think of it as an undergraduate institution. We actually have more graduate students in any given year than we do undergrads across all the different schools. It's close, but of the 10,500 roughly students we have every year, slightly more than half are in our professional programs. And so as all of you who are ambassadors for the university think about what you might talk about Tufts as you talk about with other people, these anniversaries of these schools are a reminder of our really incredible and unusual depth and diversity of graduate programs.
So folks, we're going to come to you in a few seconds. I want you to get some questions ready. And our final last question for the panel, and Peter, I'll start with you. In just a few words, what keeps you most energized in the work you do on behalf of Tufts?
So I think there are many definitions of leadership. This is clearly a leadership role or opportunity. One of the better definitions I've heard is leaders create, conserve, and channel energy. And so let me use that model as to how it applies to my role as board chair and why I get excited about doing this. Creating energy is not that difficult among 40 people who have been very successful in different walks of life, who all care about Tufts and want to do positive things for the school. So in most organizations, the ability to create energy is actually a significant task. It's not in my current role. Come to number two, conserving energy is more of a challenge. And what I mean by conserving energy is conserving the energy of the president and his team to not pursue 100 different ideas that the trustees might think would make the university great or even better. So no small task on my part, but it's fun and it's interesting and it's energizing to make sure that the trustees, when they're providing input, are providing input to those opportunities that are most significant priorities for the university. And lastly, channeling energy is what you might all think about leadership, which is moving people in the direction of accomplishing a handful of significant things. And from my perspective as board chair, what excites me is the energy in the room of the trustees who really care about the university, who have been successful and want to apply their success formulas to what Tufts should be doing, getting them all on the same page and moving in the direction to be supportive of the president and his senior team.
Deb?
Students. And so I've had the occasion now to be with students that are different from the veterinary students, because most of you have met someone who's from the age of 6 said, I want to be a veterinarian, and then they grow up and they be a veterinarian. So the diversity on this campus and our student population is wonderful from the point of view of their interests. So just 2 examples. One, I attended a poster session where undergraduate students were showing the work that they had done this summer. And it happened to be in the Department of Chemistry. And it was just so cool to stand there and to listen to them, because they have to tell you, right? They have to talk to you about their poster. And they're so energized and they're so focused. And I don't know how many of you are parents, but what I saw when I watched them and listened to them was, boy, that could have been one of my sons when they were at that age. And let me tell you, they're a lot older now. But and I just think what a gift Tufts gives to parents to have their students be in these settings where they are completely jazzed by what they're doing. And then quickly, a second example, President Monaco mentioned this new department, the Race, Colonialism, and Diaspora Department. They have a very interesting seminar series that they host, and they had a program this week. And at the end of it, they were doing questions, and this young man stood up who was clearly a student. He might have been a graduate student, but he might have been an undergrad, and asked one of the most erudite, one of the best questions I've ever heard. And it wasn't just a short, it was like a long, he set it up, and it was very, built on the seminar that had just been given. And I just thought that is impressive, that we attract students like that. So the students totally keep me going.
Tony?
Well, I'm going to just reflect on where we are right now as a university and as a nation and a world. A lot of people don't trust higher education anymore. They don't understand what value we add to society. All these high tuitions, and what are the students really doing? And what I find at Tufts is the excitement is there are a lot of challenges out there, and as president, to watch and help channel students, faculty, and staff who work on these challenges to really have that impact and show the value of higher education, not only as a benefit to an individual who gets an education here, but a benefit to society. And we do it in a very unique way. We're very open and collaborative, and we like to partner with industry or other academic institutions. And I think Tufts' trajectory in this area has really gotten better over the last 10 years, and we have a lot more we can do. And I'm just very, very excited and energized to be leading that effort.
I guess you could say lead to a brighter world. Yes. Let's see if we can take any questions. In the back. Do we have microphones? We do wait 1 second till the mic gets to you. Okay, go ahead.
I pre-planned it. Sorry, I'm going to be a bit parochial here. Heard a lot about all the sort of scientific and medical applications. Did the Sackler School play any role in any of this? Because they've not been mentioned at all.
The Sackler School.
Yeah, well done. Thanks. No, I mean, we've had all sorts of people that talk about the medical school and very graduate departments and stuff. I had a great experience there, but it's never mentioned at any of these events.
Well, I think sorry about that. It's not that we've forgotten the Sackler School, but it's one of those schools that's so integrated with all the other schools that sometimes you don't remember that it's got a separate name. Those graduate students are doing research in the medical school, the dental school, the vet school, Tufts Medical Center, and in engineering and on this campus. So because it's so integrated, I think maybe we should be saying more about it, because it really does show the interdisciplinary nature of that graduate program. And and it's unique.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding us.
Next question. Or is a question over here? Hang on 1 second, we'll get you a mic, and then we'll go over there next.
All right, is it working? So I want to thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate the time. It's great to be able to hear from people that are running the university. I was particularly interested to hear about the work that you're doing to fundraise for scholarships here at Tufts, specifically the increase in the number of Pell Grants that have been offered. It might be a little bit of old news, but I was very disheartened to read the New York Times article mentioning that Tufts University has a higher percentage of students coming from the top 1% of income-earning families in the country than it does from the bottom 60% of income-earning families in the country. The specific statistics in that article get, I think, a little bit more bothersome, but I would like to hear either one about how the money that was raised for scholarships for the class of 2022 has impacted those statistics, or two, what your concrete plans are to address the extreme lack of socioeconomic diversity on campus.
So financial aid has always been something that Tufts has not been able to compete as well with our peers because of the level of their endowment. Our endowment per student across the university is like $143,000, where if you look at the Ivies in particular, they have, orders of magnitude more funds. And that's because they were fundraising earlier than us. I mean, it's our own fault as an institution for being late to fundraising, but the compounding effect of that has put us in a position where we are only needs sensitive, in the sense that we're not need blind. We can't take any applicant. We have a budget for financial aid. We can grow that budget, but it's at the expense of hiring faculty or keeping our building stock in a shape that students can live in it or faculty can work in them. So it's always a balance between those areas. But our real problem is that our endowment is not at the level. So that's why when we started the campaign, we prioritized financial aid endowment, and we put our own money on the table to support that. And that has had an effect, which has increased our diversity, increased the number of students on financial aid. The class of 2022 has the largest number of first-gen students that we've seen. So I think we're making progress, but it's a long way from there to becoming needs blind. And I think that is not a goal of the campaign, because I don't think it's feasible, but we will keep pushing this envelope as fast and as far as we can, because it's incredibly important to the experience students have here and to us as an institution to have that diversity in the undergraduate and also our graduate and professional schools.
Also, Tony, I think among your priorities even before this campaign, financial aid has been one of your biggest priorities.
Well, diversity and inclusion, we had a president's task force. We put a lot of recommendations. That's how we got the chief diversity officer, as well as many other things we've changed. But financial aid obviously was what was needed. But we don't want to just bring in diversity for compositional reputation. It's got to be that that the environment here is inclusive for those students, and that they have all the opportunity that all students have. I just should comment also, on terms of the wealth of our students, I think everyone in this new room knows that money can buy an excellent education. We don't ask people what their assets are when they apply, correct? I mean, if they want financial aid, they got to fill out the forms and tell us, what their needs are. But there's no way for us to know but I think what you're seeing there is the skewing in the educational system, that money can buy tutors, money can buy all kinds of extra help, private schools. We try to look at a broad range of schools. Admissions has really, over the last 10 years, explored much more California. It's now our second biggest intake, Texas, areas that we didn't traditionally recruit from, where we're usually New York, New England, were the main areas we got students. So we're bringing in a lot more first-gen students, undocumented students, DACA students from those areas, and we're trying to support them with the financial aid. But it's not, how can we know what people's income is if they're not applying for financial aid? And I think what you're seeing, and it's not just at Tufts, this is all the really selective universities and colleges have this same skewing, and I think it's more of a comment on the American educational system and what people can use their money for to promote the success of their children.
There's a question over here, I think.
Wait, sorry, you or me? Yeah, cool. Hi, so my name is Nathan, and I guess with regard to that question of whether the skewing is due to broader social factors versus what Tufts does, I think it's worth adding. When I interviewed Dean Glazier a year and a half ago about this, and he estimated that 200 students are rejected each year because they can't afford to pay full tuition. So I think it's not entirely accurate to say that the lack of socioeconomic diversity at Tufts is due to social factors or due to the quality of students rather than the availability of financial aid and the cost of attending Tufts.
I didn't say that, though, did I? I said that we don't have enough financial aid to be needs blind. So when you're not needs blind and you're working on a budget, you're going to have to cut off the financial aid at some point. It's not that we don't have plenty of high-quality applicants from across the spectrum.
Is there a question over here?
Is it on? Okay, here, thank you. Hi, Megan Edmonds, class of 2014. Thank you. And President Monaco, you just referred to some of the things, having a chief diversity officer appointed. And I'm wondering what other things are being done and what other initiatives are happening on campus to not only recruit a very diverse class, but to make sure that those students thrive while they're at Tufts and have a really positive, fulfilling experience here.
Sure. One tangible project which just came to fruition this year was the First Gen Center. So this is a center set up by Rob Mack, our Chief Diversity Officer, on this campus to support and offer a place to get together for students who are first generation to college. They're going to be students from all different racial groups, and but what they do have in common is their first gen or low socioeconomic background. It's in the same building as the Office for Student Success and Advising, Residential Life, STEM Diversity. So it's created a new nucleus on campus, I think, for students, many of them on financial aid, where they can enjoy each other's company and get the resources they need for their success. I think Debbie should.
Well, no, I just might add, there are also a whole sort of palette of bridging programs that have been quite effective. The orientation programs are now much more robust and sort of setting students up to feel like they belong at Tufts and to be successful at Tufts. And that is a big agenda item for our chief diversity officers, is to not just increase the number of diverse students that we have, but also to make them really feel like Tufts is absolutely the place for them.
So thank you, first of all, to all of you for helping bring Tufts to the position where it is today. This moment in time for Tufts continues to be great.
Oh, there you are. Sorry.
So my question to you and to all four of you is, what would you like to see from us for the remainder of this campaign?
Well, I think I probably said this at the last time we got together. Your engagement and your advocacy for the university is the biggest thing you bring to this. You're bringing in people that may have drifted away as alumni. They had a good experience here, but other things have taken their attention. We haven't got them, but you have personal relationships. They're your classmates. They're your friends. Getting them reignited about and excited about the mission of the university, showing them why we should be a cause for their philanthropy. We do so many good works in areas that many people give to: health, social justice issues. We do a lot of that work here, and we've got to convince people that this is a great place to invest if you care about those causes.
Peter, anything to add?
Well, I think, and you're a great example of this. We need you to be ambassadors, and we need you to reach out and ask people to make an effort to engage with and contribute to Tufts. Our alumni engagement rate is at, I think, an all-time high. Eric, yes? At 22.7% or something like that. And we're building every year, but we're still behind the 8 ball relative to where we should be. So we need you to be knowledgeable about the university. We want you to know about the positive things that are happening. And we want you to not be uncomfortable asking others to contribute to the success and the growth of the university.
I would just add, to me, Tufts is on this like rocket ship to the stars. When I graduated, the university is so much better, stronger in every way. And yet at the same time, I think there's a real determination to keep getting better and better. So if you want to invest in a place, there's a place to invest in. Right here.
It's really exciting to be an alumnus, all the exciting things you're doing. And I'm interested also in the cost control side of it. That the popular perception is that education at, $70,000 for room, board, tuition, and everything. I mean, it's impossible. And you can't get there just by revenue increases and fundraising alone. You have to make the difficult cost control decisions. And I know that's an unpleasant subject, but it would help everybody here to go out and say that, yes, Tufts is not only raising money for great things, but it's disciplined in the money it gets. Now, I hope that's not an impolite question, but what are you doing about cost control?
When I arrived, the trend was that our surplus every year was going to decrease, and by 2015, we were going to be in a deficit position across the university. So the first thing we did was bring in a higher education consultant like Deloitte, who had a lot of experience at other universities and actually worked with Tufts on their IT unit. And they looked across our administration. As you can imagine, with 8, depending on how you count them, 9 schools, each with their own administration and separate systems, it was really an opportunity to drive some efficiency and provide a better service. So, a lot of individuals in the schools were doing multiple jobs, finance, research administration, all kinds of things, benefits. They weren't really experts in any of them. And by creating more centralized shared services with experts who also can see a career path for themselves because they're in the finance division or they're working in the Tufts support services, providing information about benefits or other things, it just was a much better and more efficient. We saved $3 or $4 million a year from that effort. And then in 2016, we went back into a surplus position. We didn't go into deficit, and it's because we cut costs. And it was a worry to the faculty and, of course, to the staff because they thought there was going to be a lot of people let go. But we actually used natural attrition, which is around 13, 14% per year, to move people, when they left, to maybe not refill that position because we've now got that activity in the shared service. So I think most people feel it was a great success. We're now trying to do it in addition in things like operations and other areas that we didn't get to. At the same time, we have to look at income generation, and I just presented to the trustees today an approval they gave for revenue generation, non-traditional programs, a new thing in the provost's office called University College, which is going to offer certificate and master and new online programs which are across the schools. And so we also will be doing more summer programs, pre-college. There are ways that we can use our intellectual and physical assets of the campus to drive revenue for educational purposes.
And just to add to that, somewhat unique for me, I've been on the board for 17 years. When we were reviewing all of the programs that are going to be added to the University College, they all came with not only a revenue number, but a margin expectation. So the intent of this was to add to our, in a positive way, to our financial situation, not just to add programs that we thought we could sell, but rather look at this in the context of how's this going to add to the bottom line, how's this going to help fund our other priorities.
And the only thing I would add to that, because you both said what I was going to say, is that doesn't happen unless the academic side of the house and the operations side of the house have a good relationship. And I think Tufts, under President Monaco's administration, that's worked really well. So when we sit down, it's about preserving reputation and quality of academic programs, but doing it with an eye to sustaining the university, and that's working.
Yes, right here. Here we go.
Thank you. Dean Scheinert, class of '81. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and you may be familiar with Michael Crow at ASU.
Yeah, I've heard him speak.
And some of the changes he has made as a disruptor in higher education. Now, I understand that it is a different model, but are there any lessons that can be taken from what he is trying to do in terms of making it an open university that prides itself on the people that it lets in as opposed to the people that doesn't? So I'm thinking, is there a way to look beyond high school grades and SAT and ACT scores to try to predict contributors and late bloomers to higher education so that we can make our university deeper, richer, and more diversified?
Let me comment first on his model of education. Now, he made a lot of changes there, and he's very well known for what he's done. But the thing I remember most is he said he knew he couldn't convince all the faculty to do these things. But what he decided was he knew there would be at least 20, 30% of the faculty that would be excited to try new online programs. How could they reach out and not just have everyone coming to them? And he decided he was just going to set up the central infrastructure for online and non-traditional programs. And then the faculty would come and they would then, by word of mouth, say, yeah, it was a great experience. I taught this course, et cetera, made a bit of money extra on top of my salary for doing it. And that's where he drove his success, by making it successful for the faculty to interact, so they didn't have to set it up all on their own. And I think that's the model that we're trying to create here with University College, that yes, it's about revenue generation. You don't want to do this and lose money, but really it's a chance for the university to think more broadly on how it educates others in society that are not in our traditional residential model. And that's not just young people, that's adults who want to lifelong learning, or corporations who want us to help train their staff in a new technology or a new digital area that we may have subject-specific expertise. So I think your point is very well taken.
Over here.
Alex Kaufman, class of 2014. So earlier it was mentioned that there's a lack of diversity in terms of upper-level management at Tufts. So I appreciate that you recognize the issue and that you offered, or starting to offer, a mentorship to people of color and women in mid-level management positions. Can you go into more detail about what kind of opportunities you're creating to enrich and grow those relationships and build them into leaders in Tufts at the moment? I think as like young professionals, it would help to know what those look like practically to help pursue and create them in our own working environments.
Why don't you start, Debbie, and then I can follow.
So those programs really are being launched now, and one example is there's a group of schools in Boston that has worked together to come with some initiatives around diversity and inclusion, and they sought grant funding, and we just found out last week that they got it. So Tufts will be participating with other institutions who are also struggling with that same issue, and the best practices, if you will, around mentoring is something, so we're going to look outward and look at practices that will help us do better. Two, our HR area has recently set up affinity groups across campus for different populations who may be interested in just having more professional development and thinking about what could they do as far as a career ladder. Now, a lot of those are staff, but many are faculty as well. It's a mixed group. I think the other issue is at the level of all of the schools, having a resource to, again, to educate people around cultural competency and the ways we need to think about people's circumstances. So why wouldn't someone have advanced already in their career? What was holding them back? Well, if we do a better job of understanding that, then our managers at the level of departments and schools will, in those environments, I think, be better able to set up their own systems. And we're early days, is what I would say.
I would just add that I think mentorship on a personal level is very important, but not only that relationship, the environment and culture of the institution. So I've tried to create an environment where I tell the deans and my senior team, I want to know if you're thinking about a career change. I'd rather help you and be successful in your next job than retain you for longer than you need to be here. And that is not the environment at many institutions. Some institutions, people are frightened to tell their superior that they're looking at another opportunity because they think that, either they're going to get fired or retribution. And we try to create an environment where we can have those discussions and help people. I don't want to hold on to everyone forever here at Tufts. We want to make sure that our leaders are then going out and leading other institutions as well. And so I think that's an important part of the mentoring, is the environment in which people feel comfortable talking to their supervisors about opportunities they might be looking at.
Question over. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, this just kind of came to mind as we're talking about, and I'm Susan Dickinson of class of 2004. Hi. Just thinking, I guess, both globally and very locally, talking about some of our collaborative efforts that are very interdisciplinary, leveraging what we have as an asset, which is the variety of disciplines that are under our umbrella, such as, I think, the discussion earlier today about civic life and how we're integrating that so well as a thread throughout all of the departments that we have. Are there any other examples of ways that we are really leveraging this strength of ours?
Strength as in civic life or
yeah, so
everything?
as really as we're leveraging, I guess, whether that is in the health sciences. So I
Okay,
guess thinking
sure,
about
sure.
things that are global issues and how we break them down using the variety of expertise that we really have in our midst. And I think that's one of our, in my opinion, what makes this so exciting for, I think, so many of us is that we have so many different interests. You learn so many different types of things. How do we, I guess, are there any other examples such as civic life, or I guess health sciences could be another one where we're strong and exceptionally known?
Yes, so health sciences definitely, but I want to throw one more in there that's,
Sure.
I think, present but is up and coming, and you should keep an eye on it. And so that is the Data Intensive Studies Center, DISC. And so what we've learned from our faculty, and you can't read the newspaper without knowing, is that all universities are making big investments in data science and data analytics. And that's something that you might think, oh, that's just the sciences, or that's just the health sciences. No, there are digital humanities now. There's every single school has some dimension of data science and or need for data science or data analysis. So I think that's a good example maybe of what you're talking about, that it's cross-cutting, and Tufts has definitely got to focus on that. Health sciences is near and dear to my heart, and it's been great to watch us be the recipient of a Clinical and Translational Science Award, a CTSA. We've had it now for going on the third cycle. We just got a $58 million grant for the third cycle, which really knits together activities in our medical school, our veterinary school, nutrition, dentistry, other institutions, MIT. And so that's another example which you rightfully called out as an area that we really should continue to focus on.
I have one more question. I'm sorry. The one right there and right there.
Do you want? All right, Neal, this question is actually for you.
Somebody else.
Anyone else can take it, though. You mentioned earlier, Neal, just how we're in like the most polarizing time the country's ever been in, or at least in recent past. And I think a lot about neutrality and the two camps, one of which is to be neutral is to be a part of the problem, and then the other side, which is to be neutral, is to rely on facts and celebrate independent thought and debate. What do you think, Neal, as a trustee and as someone in journalism, which inherently talks about neutrality all the time, what do you think Tufts' role in neutrality ought to be?
I think there are two things that as a society we cry out to have. One is there have to be some agreed amount of facts, right? You're entitled to your own argument, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And too often people talk past each other because they have facts sometimes which are not correct. Right? And there's something in which we can rely on academia and the best of the academic institutions to tell us truly what is true and what isn't. And the second thing is, I think there are very few institutions which foster reasonable understanding, people who can disagree agreeably. Right? It's very hard to find in cable television. It's very hard to find in a world where you can create your own media. But what Tufts can do, and I think especially the array of people we have here and the variety of institutions and disciplines, is to really get people to approach things in a reasonable, thoughtful way. And if we can impart that and have our students be ambassadors for that, we really can make the world a brighter world. With that, we're out of time, so please thank the panel for their great work. And I'll throw it back to Anna.
Okay, so one thing I just want to add, since I get the microphone, I got a comment. I do think that what I think Tufts' greatest asset is the alums and the people in this room. And I would encourage each of you to figure out how you want to be engaged. And we've talked about philanthropy. It's so important to university, but also just your participation. I look around this room and I think about when I got on the Alumni Council, and just like every year I always find somebody that I want to nominate to be on the Alumni Council. I would ask everyone here to look around. You go to an event, you meet somebody you think they're really great, nominate them, get them on the Alumni Council. I mean, that's how we will be able to foster further change and further engagement. So that's my little pitch. Oh, what is the deadline? November 15th. Okay, whatever. I already did my nomination for this year. So one thing a year. Can't do everything. Just find one person every year. And on the diversity front, I've made that. I always try to nominate a woman or a minority. I've made an exception when there's some meritorious person who lives in Brooklyn. I'll do that, since that's where I live. In any event, but I encourage everyone to do that. If you have any further questions for our panelists, they will be on the mezzanine level outside the auditorium for further questions. The next session starts here right, at 3:15. By the way, Peter's also my class of 78.